We're going to transition to our second panel now, and I'm going to get started introducing our moderator. Dr. William Sauser is Professor Emeritus of Management at the Harbert College of Business at Auburn University. Over the past 40 years, Dr. Sauser has offered over 1,000 programs in leadership and human relations in the workplace to a variety of organizations in Alabama and Georgia. Please help me welcome Dr. William Sauser, sitting right here. And next up, I'm going to introduce Mr. Athar, who's also seated right over there, Director for International Specialty Sales at Delta Airlines. He leads a team that manages Delta's relationships with accounts specialized in Asia Pacific, among other regions, and coordinates joint selling activities with partners, including Korean Air. Please welcome Mr. Athar. I'd also like to welcome to the stage now Miss Yoonie Kim. Yoonie Kim is the Director of Korean Investment for the Georgia Department of Economic Development. Since joining the department in 2006, she has located 130 foreign direct investment projects into Georgia, creating over 22,000 international jobs and over $11 billion in capital investment. And I'm going to remind myself of that number the next time I'm feeling a little bit too arrogant. I haven't brought that much. So please help me welcome Miss Yoonie Kim. Next up, we got Mr. Stephen Jahng. He's the Director and Head of External Affairs and Social Value for SK Battery America. He was previously Executive Director for JP Morgan in Seoul and Singapore and Director at HSBC Investment Bank in Seoul. Please help me welcome Stephen Jahng. And of course, I'd like to welcome Mr. Stuart, Countess, President and Chief Executive Officer of Kia's Georgia manufacturing facility in West Point, Georgia. He's responsible for all operational facets of the Ford model assembly plant that employs over 2,900 employees and produces a capacity of 340,000 vehicles annually. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Stuart, Countess. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. William Sauser.
Thank you so much. I'll be on this microphone for a moment and then switch to the other one. It's good to see everybody. Good morning to you. I want to begin by thanking General Brooks and General Lee for your service to our nations and for the service of all the brave women and men who have served under your commands. They're the ones we really need to thank. I also want to remind all of us that the diplomatic corps is a very strong part of national defense, and we want to thank Mr. Shapiro and the ambassadorial corps and all of our ambassadors, diplomats as well. Thank you, sir. That was a wonderful presentation. I said I wish I could sit at the knees of these speakers and just listen to them all day long. I think I would learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot in today's session, too, and I'd like to begin by thanking our panelists. We have here with us today, there's Stuart, Countess, down at the end, President and CEO of Kia, Georgia, and I pass his plant every time I drive from Auburn to Atlanta. Very impressed with it. We have Mr. Stephen Jahng here in the middle. Mr. Jahng, Director of External Affairs, Social Value for SK Battery. And I am delighted to have SK Battery locating here. That's such a great accomplishment. Mr. Athar, who is Director of International Specialty Sales of my personal air carrier of choice, and that's Delta Airlines. I'm a good Atlanta boy. Yes. And Ms. Yoonie Kim is Director of Korean Investment in the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And just look at all of the impact she and her colleagues have had across this region over the past few years. Thank you so much for what you and your team have done. From my vantage point at Auburn University, for those of you who don't know, is just over the state line in Alabama. It's a public university of about 25,000 students, comprehensive university involved in all kinds of aspects of teaching, research, and outreach. From my vantage point of Auburn University, located on the I-85 corridor, midway between the Kia and the Hyundai assembly plants, surrounded by a host of supplier companies, from that perspective, it's evident to me we're benefiting from a strong economic alliance between the USA and Korea. We are all beneficiaries of that alliance. New battery manufacturing and assembly plants locating in Georgia and Alabama and elsewhere across the South underscore the strength of this relationship. Now, our infrastructure, including air transportation, is a major factor in sustaining our partnership. So it's great to have an air carrier infrastructure representative on this panel. Strong economic partnerships like the one we enjoy between Korea and the USA don't just appear out of thin air. It takes a lot of hard work and commitment to sustain this partnership. And there are many in this room who are working very hard to sustain and expand the partnership as we speak. The economic future of both our nations is built on partnerships like these, and it's maintained and strengthening the U.S.-Korean partnership. That's a strategic policy implication. You see, it's part of the strategy of the two nations to build strong economic alliances, because nations that have strong economic alliances look out for one another. We know that, don't we? And it's a good way of strengthening us not only for defense and diplomacy, but also for manufacturing, commerce, and economic success. Strong economic ties are a major contributor for peaceful relations among nations. It's to our material benefit that we maintain and strengthen this relationship. Now, we're all aware of recent challenges that have impacted manufacturing and transportation. The COVID pandemic has had a tremendous impact. Supply chain issues across the world have had a tremendous impact. The Great Resignation, have you heard that term? The Great Resignation, as people have left the workplace and it's hard to get them to come back. I'm finding that in all of the suppliers that I work with, they're having difficulty bringing their workforce back and attracting new workforce. A shortage of computer chips, of course, disruptions to our energy supply, all of these are big challenges. But there are also great opportunities arising. We're aware of the tremendous opportunities for all-electric vehicles, powerful and long-lasting batteries, and nimble air transportation, to name just a few. So this discussion is aimed at exploring some of the broad issues from the perspective of three of our manufacturing and transportation partners, plus Georgia's agency charged with further enhancing the U.S. Korea economic partnership. And we're interested, all of us are interested, in hearing their thoughts about what's happening around us and how new opportunities are arising and what challenges they are experiencing, how they are overcoming these challenges, what policy changes may be needed to enhance our economic partnership. The way the discussion is designed is that we will have 3 rounds of questions. I'll be asking questions. Our panelists will respond and are also invited to respond to one another before we move to the next round. These questions are intentionally broad, as you will notice. I designed them that way specifically to give our panelists as much room as possible to address the issues that are of greatest importance to them. Top of mind, if you will, as they provide leadership to the key elements of our partnership. So please, panelists, don't be constrained by any of the questions I ask. Let us hear your thoughts. Feel free to provide insights from your own organization's perspective as well as your own personal. we've got a lot of material to cover. About time for me to hush up, isn't it? Because I want to move right on to the panel. We've got a lot of material to cover, so I ask when we move to questions and answers from the audience, and that will occur after the third round of questions, please raise your hand. One of our staff members will bring a microphone to you so everyone can hear your question. Keep your questions concise and to the point, like we had in the last panel discussion, and we'll have lots of opportunities to hear from our panelists. They'll also, of course, be here during the rest of the seminar to interact with you personally. So I'm going to hush up now and sit down and ask the first question. Dear panelists, here is indeed the first question. From your perspective, what are the key trends that are driving the USA Korea economic partnership? The main challenges that we're facing, and the biggest threats and opportunities. So that's pretty broad, isn't it? What's driving this? What are the threats? What are the opportunities? And I'm particularly interested in what makes the southeastern United States attractive for Korean investment. So I'll leave you with that broad question and invite Mr. Countess to respond first.
First,
How about that?
first guy
Right,
on the
and
end.
off we go.
Can you hear me? Oh, there he goes. Yeah, I have to start off with, I think it's partnerships. It starts, at least from our viewpoint, certainly here in the state of Georgia, with economic development and how you recruit and set up for businesses to be successful. Without that, it becomes a very difficult situation. When you add in economic development, you take in the Georgia Quick Start program from a workforce development, you add in the technical college systems within Georgia, expand that into the Port Authority, you have the essential pieces to be successful. It's how they partner and work with you to achieve that. Certainly from a larger perspective in the Hyundai Motor Group, obviously we've been here now finishing our 13th year of manufacturing, building over 3.7 million cars here. We have experienced that every day and continuing every day. Without those individual agencies and departments helping us to understand how we grow together to make Georgia a great place to live and work, as the common saying is, it could be difficult. So I think that's very essential to what goes on. Certainly, the larger family in the Hyundai Motor Group, if you look going into 2025, was certainly the recent announcement. Hyundai will make almost 700,000 cars inside the state of Georgia, which is phenomenal. You can add in another company that's been brought in also, and you're looking at over 1 million cars. I do believe that speaks highly with how there's a partnership and collaboration between private companies and the state to make everyone successful.
Mr. Cohen? All right.
Thank you. Thank you. So, first I want to thank the General, and the previous conversation was eye-opening. If I knew all of that, I would have never lived in Korea. No, just kidding. That's why they didn't tell me. But truly, thank you for your service, and thank you on both sides. It's incredible. Great information, very enlightening, and I'm glad to be here today. And it's all by fate that I'm sitting in front of you because the COVID brought me to Atlanta. I've moved about 25 times in my life, had the pleasure of living almost everywhere in the world, but I'm sitting here in the home hub of Delta Airlines. So for us, it's very similar. We are a global organization. I think we heard in the previous panel that the United States is a global leader and works with partnerships. And it's evident in our business today because we are partnered in every part of the world with a very, with a very strong entity in that part of the world. So for Korea, it's in Asia Pacific, it's very clear for us, there was one choice, that was Korean Air. And we are, the level of trust and partnership is incredible. There are teams working both in Seoul, in Gimpo, and in Atlanta and the rest of the United States together every day. In fact, in our offices in Atlanta, the Korean Air office is within our headquarters. They have their own they have their own office in Los Angeles because they have other economic interests there. But majority of the sales organization is based right here in Atlanta. So that speaks volumes of the level of trust and cooperation that's been built over time between Korean and Delta. In fact, this table right here, number 2, you'll see both people from Delta and Korean Air seated together. So not only that, it's just every decision that we make, it's very thought out, discussed for. My Korean friends will know that Korea doesn't make quick decisions. They're very thoughtful and intentional about making decisions, and Delta respects that. And so it takes a lot of that cooperation to partner up. But there's a lot of best practice sharing. There's a lot of, you may have experienced it in COVID, that all of the safety protocols that Delta put in place, Korean Air had very similar safety protocols. So those are just fine examples of the collaboration, cooperation, joint venture mindset that creates that economic engine. And we work with the economic development teams all over the world, and in this case, we work with them very closely. And I think I'll also address that I think Atlanta's weather is very attractive for the Korean community. The summer and the humidity just reminds them of home. And the winter is much milder, right? Not enough snow, so that's good. So there's all these things that actually match up for Atlanta and Korea. And when you launch an airplane between two cities, it not only makes communities rethink where they are, what they're doing, but that's just the start of the connectivity between the two countries. Because then the next thing that happens is the communities start gathering, right? They start building their environment, and what follows is a freighter aircraft. So all the goods start coming in. So you just have to go to certain parts of Atlanta, and I can go to a Korean grocery store, I can eat my Korean barbecue, and I can drink soju and makgeolli and have a wonderful night. So that's what it does. The economic development, the connectivity, the cooperation, and the collaboration. It creates an environment where people are comfortable. I think I'll stop there.
That's beautiful. That certainly has been our impression in the small town of Auburn, college town. My goodness, the Korean impact in that community has been dramatic and for the better. It certainly improved relations, and we see a lot of friendships being built among our Korean as well as American employees and leaders. That's a fine answer. Now I'm going to turn to Mr. Jahng.
Without trying to sound like a Georgia salesperson, there are many reasons why it is blatantly obvious why Korean companies choose Georgia as their home. It is, as Mr. Countess said, economic development and Pat Wilson. It is the governor's office. It's the technical college system. It is the university system. It is the local leaders that welcome you. The Southern hospitality is very similar to Korean hospitality. It is the day I landed in July of 2019, everybody was very welcoming and very warm in this part of the world. I think Savannah Port has a lot to do with it. Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, the busiest airport in the world, has a lot to do with it. But for a Korean company that tends to think about their employees quite a bit, I think Atlanta being, I believe now, the third or maybe the second largest Korean immigrant population in America has a lot to do with it. It is, if you go to Duluth and Suwannee, it feels like Korea. Sometimes it feels more Korea-ish than K-Town in LA and 32nd in New York. I think it is a key reason, besides the infrastructure, I think the standard quality of living for an average Korean person, Korean expat coming to Atlanta, it by far is much better than any quality of life you're going to find in most regions of the United States. And I'll leave it there because Yoonie needs something to say.
That certainly gave you a good opening, didn't it? Let's hear from Ms. Kim.
Yeah, so as a person who works for the state of Georgia, let me back up with some of the stats about state of Georgia Korean business here. So we currently have more than 130 Korean companies in the state of Georgia, and those companies employ more than 22,000 Georgian. And so just last fiscal year itself, Korean companies created more jobs than any other countries in the world. And so the main reason these days is that a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of countries are dealing with the supply chain issue right now. And Korean companies also recognize the benefit of bringing Korean business, Korean supply chain to United States. And these days, because of this supply chain, diversifying supply chain is the top priority to a lot of countries in the world as well. And this bringing supply chain is really benefit for Korean companies, and also United States is one of the safer bets for Korean companies to do manufacturing and protection of IP and more.
Panelists, do we see any opportunities and threats coming down the way as we look strategically at expansion or bringing in new industry or building our partnerships? What are some of the threats and opportunities that maybe you've identified? And I'll ask any of you who wish to respond to comment on that.
Yeah, I think you covered one. COVID turned us upside down. And to be quite honest, we're still struggling in how to deal with it, whether it's getting workforce back in place, supply chain issues. I think that's going to be there. Many have heard me say before, I believe that risk was always out there. It just got accelerated about 5 to 7 years earlier than what we anticipated. But we tend to talk internally, at least within our culture at the Kia plant, is about what is that opportunity. How do we turn something that can be perceived as a negative into something that positively can grow us? One of the very few phrases that I understand and know in Korean is I understand pali pali. But I think there's a lot of credibility in that. What I've seen in my experience as compared to a previous OEM is the ability to change and do it so quickly is incredible. We launched as a plant 2 brand new cars in the middle of the pandemic. That took a lot of coordination, but it took a lot of perseverance and determination on individuals. You will not see us give up. There is no answer out there that says no. It's just, how are we going to get there? And I think that that's the opportunity. But it also speaks to something that the generals had commented to. It's about continuous improvement. And what I see, whether it's product development or cultural ways that we're handling problems, it's always looking for that next answer and what are we going to do to improve on it.
I think it's very similar for us. And for any of you who were affected by our holiday travel recently, I want to apologize up front. I hope your bags are with you. But Delta invested about, very quietly in 2019 and 18, Delta invested about $50 million in putting coating on every aircraft loading belt, basically the door that allows the bags to go in. And that allowed, so basically, it's just like a grocery store barcode, but it allows your bags to be with you everywhere. And you can, that's how you can track them on the Delta app, right? So that's a good thing, and that now it's paying off. And we knew that any of our competitors who decides to do it, it would take them about 2 years to try and catch up with us. And we've got a fleet of about 900 jets, so it's a lot of work. It took us about the same amount of time to do it ourselves. But now coming through COVID, I mean, we've had the same challenges where we had a lot of our colleagues leave. We had a lot of colleagues leave the company either with early out packages or early retirements. So we've already hired about 12 to 15,000 people back in the last few months. Our staffing is getting very close to where we want it to be, and it's not going to stop because Delta is growing. Now, we were talking about Atlanta here, but Korean Air, as our joint venture partner, flies to almost every major city in the United States, and they've just reinstated Las Vegas as well. For those of you who were missing that, so from Korea, wanted to come into Las Vegas for the shows and never talk about gambling. But yes, I mean, so really, I mean, you have an amazing network between Delta and Korean Air of being able to connect Seoul and the rest of Korea with the United States, not only Georgia, but also how it helps the United States is we use it as our hub to 80 destinations plus in Asia Pacific, Philippines, and we heard all the challenges, and we heard the previous session talk about geopolitical challenges, and which are driving some supply chains to move to other parts of the world. So that's what helps us in transporting all of those industries to those opportunities, whether it may be the Philippines or Vietnam or wherever else. And Korean Air plays a huge part in that, in working with us and making that happen for the U.S. community. We've luckily in the last couple of days we've overcome our challenges in the operational side, and we had 0 cancellations for the last 2 days. And majority of the cancellations that happened, the few that happened, were on the commuter side, so the smaller aircraft that actually feed the larger jets from small cities. But it's not an easy challenge. We only see opportunity with all of the COVID controls off in Korea now. It's nothing but the skies are bright. Yeah.
There we go. Before we leave the trends, I do need to ask my partner, Dongwoo Yu, over here, and I have done a number of training programs, cultural programs, leadership programs, and some of the supplier companies that supply Kia and Hyundai and other organizations. And as we go around and work with them, we find that they're having a lot of trouble attracting and retaining a qualified workforce. And I'm just wondering, I know it's impacted manufacturing, transportation. I'm just wondering if that is a trend that concerns you at this point.
Every time I sit on these panels, first topic of conversation is workforce, second topic is workforce, and the third topic is workforce. Mr. Countess and I have gone through workforce every time we sit on this. And the fact is, I think maybe corporates have become complacent in terms of the way they hire over the years because it was always very easy to hire. But I think COVID has forced us to be nimble, creative, and probably work closer with the community and the schools and potentially in Georgia, technical colleges, to find new ideas, new creative ways to educate, train, and hopefully hire. We can't, our old ways are not going to work. And that's simple fact this day and age. For us, we're working with the Commissioner of Veteran Affairs in Georgia to try to hire more veterans for our facility. We are working with the technical colleges to try to create curriculums to fit our advanced manufacturing environment. I will work with dual enrollment, whatever it may be, high school level, technical college level, and college level at that. And overall, the technical colleges, the dual enrollment, the University of Georgia, and whatnot have been very supportive of our creative and sometimes very odd endeavors. But for me, I think it's forcing us to be different in the way we go about business at this point.
Yes, sir.
I don't think we've had a pilot training program at Delta forever, but now we do. Now we do. So we had so many senior pilots retire, and a pilot cycle, for those of you who might be interested in flying, takes about 2 years to move somebody from the right seat to the left seat in the cockpit. So it's not a quick process. You can't just go to the street and buy a pilot, right? So it is a fairly technical process to train someone to be in a captain seat or a first officer seat, and they usually are coming from a feeder airline, right? Commuter airline. So we've had to learn through that. We've had to create programs for pilots internally. We are churning out right now 500 pilots a month. It's a big number. So I completely agree. We've had to be creative. We've had to go off book here and do things that haven't been done in a very long time. But we want to do it our way because there is a certain culture that we don't want to give up, right? We want that same culture, we want that same training, we want that same confidence in the people that we want to put out as Delta colleagues. So there's a lot of this happening. When we heard the term revenge travel, we didn't know what that meant. But July 4th weekend taught us that revenge travel exists, right? So we learned it the wrong way. But it is a supply and demand issue that all of us are dealing with, and it's how quickly and efficiently and appropriately you can address the situation. That's what we're working with.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to move us along now to round number 2. Round number 1 had to do with key trends. Round number 2 focuses on innovation. So here's the question. How does the U.S. Korea technological cooperation drive innovation in your industry? We've already heard some good answers to a question like that. What are the next steps forward? What do we have to look forward to in the future? Who would like to start with that one? Oh, good.
It's quite a big change that's happened certainly in the last 12 to 36 months. Obviously, we love to talk about EVs. Georgia, as a state, is quickly becoming a hub. That's supported by what Stephen has already said, with the university system, the technical college. All of that is important because we've got to not only attract these individuals in to come and work at our companies, and that seems to be kind of an area where their minds are focused. They like the high technology stuff. Great, we have something to offer for you. But innovation is going to continue to change. I'll give the example in a car. Many, many years ago, a car used to be about an 8 to 10 year life cycle. It's maximum 5 years now. That also changes the discussion of what Stephen alluded to, and he and I are on a roadshow tour about workforce development continuously, is we have to be at the forefront as industry saying what's coming, because we know those changes are coming, and how do we share and teach and get courses developed to help bring the next step of the innovation forward. Partnerships at least within certainly the state of Georgia, asking industry what is our input and feedback on building out an infrastructure to support EVs. Yeah, we need to participate. We have to participate because we know what's coming. So I think you'll see a continuation in that. It's certainly a big task, but we have the right players. There's a lot of feedback that I know personally going on in between Korea and the U.S., again, supporting these technological advances so that we can understand what we have to be prepared for as a state.
Thank you. Who else would like to respond on innovation?
It is clearly evident because you do see in the EV space, the battery maker and the OEM locating to the southeast and mainly in Georgia at this point. The U.S. still lacks battery production across the board. But it seems like it's being concentrated in the southeast at this point. Chicken or the egg, although non-U.S. big three are located here in terms of OEMs, and hence all these battery manufacturers are coming to hopefully the southeast. 3 of the key battery manufacturers in the world are Korean. I think with the supply chain and whatnot, I think Georgia has just situated itself in an ideal location, especially with Kia at West Point, Hyundai Motors down in Savannah, and us locating here. I think in terms of innovation and technological advances, I think the sky's the limit at this point because of the sheer fact that key players are locating in this state at this point. And also, in addition to that, I think the support that I think our suppliers have been getting from the state, from Yoonie's team and from Pat's team, about locating to Georgia just makes life so much easier in terms of supply chain. And Stuart mentioned it as well. The Port of Savannah does wonders. The inland port in Gainesville will do wonders for everything across the board. The advances are only, we're just beginning at this point. And in addition to that, I always, at these sessions, allude to advanced manufacturing and the manufacturing that we are doing. The historical old-style manufacturing that you are accustomed to is not the manufacturing of the future. Our facility is fully air-conditioned. Our employees don't make anything. The machines make everything. Our production employees operate the robots that do the manufacturing. That is the manufacturing of the future. And we are getting tremendous support from the College of Engineering at UGA, the technical college system, to support that manufacturing. And yeah.
I can certainly personally attest to that. Can't those of you who operate or have been in plants seen a dramatic change in the manufacturing process over the past decade or two? And as we see these new plants being built, they are totally different from what we were used to in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Yes. Other comments on trends? Yes, sir.
I was just going to say that we're not yet there to have EJs, so electric jets are not yet there. But we are in the process of getting there. So you may have seen these large machines that actually push the aircraft out and pull it back into its gate. They're called tugs. So essentially, Delta is on a mission right now. We've already exchanged all of our old tugs that were always emitting gas and fumes and all that good stuff. They're all going electric. And we've already moved a lot of those tugs into electric tugs. So that's what's happening on one side of just being responsible to the environment. And the second thing that we're doing is single-use plastics are not in fashion anymore. So they're going off the aircraft, and we'll take off about 4.9 million pounds a year off of aircraft. That's what we've calculated as to what will come off for the year. And then we've gone to bamboo cutlery. So we're really getting in touch with ourselves in nature, right? So when you're eating, you can taste it. No, I'm just kidding. Only joking. But I've used it. It's actually very effective and very useful and very good. And you don't miss the plastic that way. So lots of innovation that's coming on.
That's really good. I'm optimistic. Isn't it great hearing a lot of optimism from our panel? I'd like to ask Ms. Kim. Now, she can't comment on any individual companies that may be interested in relocating here, but I'm just wondering, are there trends of innovation and types of companies we might be looking toward in the future?
Yeah, so as Stuart mentioned, the state of Georgia is becoming a national hub for this industry, including automotive, EV battery, and some of the energy-related industries. So this industry includes some of our recent location, which include SK Battery America and Hana Q-Cell, Hyundai Motor Group, and so on. And so we have really good amount of big mega project location recently, which include Hyundai Motor Company, which will create more than 8,000 jobs in the state. And so from my perspective, I think the state next step should be not only supporting this big mega project industry, but also we need to cultivate their supplier companies and helping them to create solid and strong ecosystem for the industry. So thanks to the current Biden administration's plan on Indo-Pacific economic framework, so there will be more closer collaboration between Korea and U.S. in the future, and those framework will be helpful for tech and services agreement. So Georgia is already leading the industry, including EV and EV battery industry, and so we are currently continue to establish this supply chain in the state.
Wow, a lot to look forward to. That's wonderful. We're going to turn now to our third round, which is a pick your own, and some of our panelists have chosen the question they'd like to answer. So we've heard a lot about workforce training and development and supply chain resilience. I'd like to ask our two manufacturing representatives, as you talk about workforce, what might be some of the development opportunities for workforce training and for the resilience of our supply chain?
You go first.
Great.
All right, you guys gonna have to sit here a while.
I don't have to speak.
A lot of people have left the industry, and everybody, and it's not just us in Georgia, it's everybody across the country that is struggling to hire workforce. Be it, I've mentioned already, training. There's plenty of high school students that hit the workforce right out of high school in Georgia. They're probably better because they play with iPhones and iPads all their lives, and it's probably better to operate on robots. But I would like to suggest one alternative, which is legalized immigration. There's plenty of people in this world that still have the American dream, that want to live in America, that have skill sets that are probably ideal for, I would love to say manufacturing, but I use nursing as an example all the time. There's a severe shortage of nurses in America right now. I visit hospitals all across Georgia. They're only 50% staff in terms of nurses. And I will use Philippines as an example. They have tons of nurses that speak English. If we can legalize immigration properly, maybe we are able to fill that void of shortage of workforce, not just in manufacturing, but across the board.
Now, you heard that from a man who knows what's going on, and that's a major policy implication. Thank you, sir. Mr. Countess.
Yeah, I tend to focus certainly in the workforce development piece, but also how that's going to be important in the supplier resiliency issue. Plants like ourselves tend to bring in a lot of other additional companies. To bring in a battery, they weigh a lot, so you can only get so many on a truck bringing them in. So there's a population, as the professor has already stated, if you go between our plant and the plant in Montgomery, it's just dotted with suppliers. And most of them are Korean suppliers that have come to support one or both of our plants. I think you'll continue to see that trend, but what typically happens is you get your tier ones in and maybe a couple of tier twos. And now that we're in our 10th, 13th year, you see the threes, the fours all popping up. And that's just a general, at least from an automotive sector, that's a trend that you'll continue to see. So that, again, it creates a lot of opportunities within the state or nationwide. Comment too quickly on Stephen's concept or statement about robots and these things that we're having to utilize. We're a lot focused right now on smart factory concepts. So that's kind of one of the buzzwords out there in the industry. But it's also one of those things that does attract talent to come work for us. Yet we still need to look about how do we attract these graduating seniors who maybe don't have post-secondary aspirations in the beginning. How do we provide them with a career, show them what they can learn and do working for one of our companies? Now that requires us from a culture point of view to cultivate that with them. We can't just put them in there and leave them to their own. We got to show them that we have education reimbursement programs. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can earn. That's a very different approach than we have followed for at least in my lifetime. but we're now shifting to that. And Stephen and I have had a lot of conversations with different people. This is where we're going to have to go. And that means you have to create a culture inside your own company that will attract that talent that you can maintain.
Thank you very much. And we've heard a couple of policy implications already about educational support, about legal immigration. I'd like to ask Mr. Khan if he would comment on what policy and regulatory changes might be needed to enhance our economic cooperation.
Thank you. I think from an airline perspective, we're in pretty good state. I think making it seamless for the Korean community to travel to the United States and back has been a big support. So thank you, Korean government, for opening up the doors. That's been very helpful. I think also if I talk to my colleagues in various areas of the company, I think it's just about regulation. So if there's less regulations between such a close partner ally, that just makes it easier to conduct business. So that's what I would say, short and sweet.
And that's very helpful. Thank you. And boy, have I got a great one for you, Ms. Kim. Here's what I've seen in my own community, just tremendous opportunities and growth in the Auburn, Opelika area and positive impact. I'm interested to know from the community's point of view, what might be some of the advantages to attracting Korean manufacturing and distribution companies?
I think when companies looking at their possible location within the state or within the nation, they have to do a lot of checkbox to satisfy their location decision. But certainly, workforce is a key issue these days, and because of our great workforce training program, I have two prospect company here, so let me pitch a little bit about state of Georgia. So we have great workforce training program called Quick Start, and they have been a great asset to the state and to the companies, and they have been proved itself since 1968, if I remember correctly. And so also we encouraged companies to develop partnership with community colleges and universities so that they can cultivate the relationship and trust between those two entities. And we have seen a lot of Georgian companies that are really benefit from those relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have time now for a few questions from the group, and if you would raise your hand, we'll bring the microphone. Yes, sir. First question, and you can address it to an individual panelist or to the panel as a whole.
Test 1, 2, 3. Can you hear? Okay. This is to Mr. Jahng. I was just curious, can you comment on when the battery plant in Commerce is projected to start production? When will it open?
We're building two plants. Plant one is complete. We are currently supplying for the Ford F-150 Lightning, and we will soon be supplying for the Volkswagen ID4 out of Chattanooga. Plant two should be operational Q1 of next year. That plant will be fully dedicated to Ford.
Coming soon. Other questions? Other questions? Raise your, yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am. We have a question here and another over here. Mm-hmm.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. My question is just to the panelists. So I work in the consumer industry, and I know you guys mentioned the keyword supply chain a bunch of times, but I just wanted to dig a little bit deeper. So we earlier talked about, the China and its importance in the economic environment. So my question is, what can the alliance between America and South Korea do to decouple the need for production happening in China? I mean, if you go to any supermarket, you buy online, you always find made in China. So what can this strategic alliance do to further strengthen that bond to improve the supply chain issues?
What a great question. Who has a response? You've stunned us. It has a response.
Well, I'll start it off. And, look, I talked about how we're helping industries find other options, right, for moving their production facilities. And it's already happening. It's happening for Philippines. It's happening for Vietnam, Cambodia. So there's a lot of production happening. So the labels in stores are starting to change slowly. And we, Korean Air and us play a part in ensuring that we can get you there, right? So that's the part that we play in this process, is having a network that can having truly a global network that can get you anywhere you need to go to address these issues. But it is happening. We're seeing it. We are hearing from customers. And for anybody in the room that does not have a program with Delta, just like economic development, we offer programs at all levels for corporate entities that you partner with us, and whether you're a small size business, medium size, or large, and the program is between Delta and Korean Air, so it's synonymous.
Let me add some of the comments to Mr. Khan's comment. So also logistic cost as well. So logistic cost is skyrocketing these days. So a lot of companies see, no more benefits to do manufacturing in China and ship to United States. And so that's why a lot of, including Korean companies, are trying to come to U.S. and try to establish their manufacturing plant in the U.S.
We have one additional question. Can we ask this one question and give us a quick question here.
I can give you a response, and Stephen knows this.
Oh,
100% of the anode materials that go into a battery are processed through China. That's changing. Like, we're setting up a Mary anode, which is going to make anode materials in the United States. So it'll take time, but that shift is already happening.
thank you. Thank you for that information. I'd like to thank our panel, and I'd like to thank the audience for good questions. Thank you very much, folks. This was very stimulating.